I'm Cathryn Carson. My topic for today is institutional transformation. So glad that you're here. I'll be speaking about this from Berkeley perspective, opening up some interesting and important conversations I think many of us are having across data science. So let me paint a picture of transformation at Berkeley by starting in the small with two stories. Let me begin first with a student, Ian Castro. Ian took our Foundations of Data Science class, Data 8, when he first got to Berkeley, with no intention when he arrived of studying data science. Ian was taken. He was drawn in by the interdisciplinarity and also by the ways in which data science promised transformations across other fields. Ian is not a data science major. He studies biology and media studies, but he's gotten engaged in the process, gotten engaged in teaching other students, teaching across the curriculum as well, and helping other faculty create their new materials. This is a story of Ian's transformation. It's also a story of our program's transformation by pulling in the energy and the investment of students like him. Let me also tell you a little story about Victoria Robinson. She's a colleague of mine here at Berkeley, works in the Department of Ethnic Studies and leads our program on American cultures. She came to our first on-campus workshop and said to us, what you guys are doing is really interesting, but you know what I need is something different. I need you to help me to bring data science into my classroom on my own terms. Victoria teaches a class on detention and immigration, and she wanted to work with us on putting in a module about quantitative exploration of prison overcrowding in California. She and her team have been working with us for several years now, developing course materials by working with her current and former students to create ever new materials that address the changing situation in her field. So I want to bring our eyes on the topic of transformation. This is the world that we live in, a world that has Ian's and Victoria's in it, as well as those of us who come to programs on data science education. How do we build a data science program that's fully adequate to this world that we live in? I'll be speaking today about the answer that I'd give on behalf of UC Berkeley. As I said at the start, my name is Cathryn Carson. I'm a faculty member here at Berkeley and an associate dean in our division of computing, data science, and society. I've been fortunate to be a kind of institutional steward of this transformation that Berkeley's been going to, and I feel I'm speaking here on behalf of that larger collectivity of faculty, staff, and students who've carried it together. In brief, I've chaired or co-chaired two of our campus level design committees. I've stayed with the undergraduate program as faculty lead for much of that intervening time. I've also co-designed and taught one of the backbone courses, Data 104. So I want to use this time here to draw you into our transformation story in the hope that you can find it useful as you tackle your own. I'll be offering you some language and frameworks that you can try out for plotting and navigating this transformation. And if it seems like a lot, just know that for us at Berkeley, it's been a long-term institutional strategy. We've been at this for 6 years so far, and I'll say more about that strategy and process as we'll go. So what we'll talk about today, I've put here on the slide, starting with why are we calling this institutional transformation, rather than just something rather less ambitious like building a data science undergraduate program. I want to talk about our goal and the way we've approached it by building a coalition to carry the program, how we've carried that through in execution, and then zoom back out to this big picture of institutional change. But why institutional transformation to start with? Well, we see it in the world, we see it in our classrooms. This is clear and real. The classification of data that comes out of human and natural phenomena, the datafication of the whole world that we live in and the signals that we as human beings put out, prediction, pattern recognition, machine learning algorithms are put to work across just about every part of our social order today and are changing it day by day. And that brings about a need for critical data science capacity across society and in many, many segments of our future workforce, because data science is transforming our world the world of human beings. It calls for a new strand in the education that we give our students, calls for it in a more holistic and sometimes pretty challenging way. So let me put some structure into this observation. Data science is a new thing in the world, and the world is a human world. And what comes out in response as a science is a human and a social science, no less than a natural science. This is not just another technical major added in among others. It's a broad base to our education at Berkeley. We see how very broad this need is. And since it's not limited to technical majors, how does everyone get what they need? Today, we're seeing, I think, something comparable to the Cold War investment in STEM education, but broader, potentially more empowering, certainly more conscious of its consequences, we hope more democratic. And it is potentially at scale, happening in real time, and happening fast. So how do you work in this kind of situation? How do you manage an institutional transformation in real time? Institutional transformation doesn't start from looking inward at higher education's established structures. It starts from looking outward. It starts from the change in the world. So the question for higher education is not just how do you get a data science program stood up, but how do you do it right so that it gets the right people engaged, the right architecture and values built in, so that it is both strong and broad-based, well-anchored, adaptive to change, so it can meet the needs in the world and the demand from our students, which is why we're here. So how do you manage an institutional transformation? You start by recognizing it as one and taking some cues and concepts from analyses of social movements, theories of change, narratives of growing organizations. Data science done right changes the institution that hosts it. And that makes it even more significant to do well. So if we're going to field to create and offer a data science program that's fully adequate to this world, we need it to be holistic and connected. We need it to be socially reflexive and technically strong. So let's come out to the goal. If this is what we're aiming at, a major that has those features and a program around it that reaches out, then it's more than just the stacking of, say, a computer science and statistics degree, or even some subset of that union plus domain area stacked on. We need more complex thinking than that. The world is teaching us that these disciplines are fusing and being reconfigured, and historical boundaries have gotten entangled. There's fractal interweaving at all kinds of different scales. And if you look at our students, they are not interested in our disciplinary boundaries. They're interested in the world and acting in it and what they can do. So what that's meant for us is a design challenge. First, we can begin with the areas where data science is used, which we want to make integral rather than an afterthought. This is where student interest most commonly starts. Here you see a set of slides of modules that we had offered in the semester in the past, the semester when we first worked with Victoria Robinson in ethnic studies. Each different discipline here brings in its own questions and frameworks, and we need to meet the instructors and the students where they are on their own terms, respecting their categories, respecting their methodological stances. Modules are a vehicle for doing this, so are in the Berkeley Lingo connector courses, also junior and senior level courses and domain emphases in the major. So engaging applications is one strand of it. Another is deeply fusing computation and inference, making it broadly available and accessible so students want to engage in this intellectual revolution that's happening at the technical core of data science. You can see just how elegantly statistical concepts emerge in the work of computing on data. An example here we have here is random selection and bias in American jury selection. So we do this in both of our gateway courses, Data 8 at the freshman level, Data 100 at the junior level. You'll hear about these elsewhere in the program. They're foundational to our work. And the fusion of computing and statistics that happens in these courses makes both those disciplines look different. They're reconfiguring. So this is more than, say, two halves of a course glued together or even alternating weeks. It is conceptually rethought. So a third vector, human context and ethics are brought in, making data science responsive to the demands of the day, part of what students need to learn. If our world is changing, if data science happens in the human world, in human contexts, then we need to make students capable of wielding the interpretive and analytical tools that come from the social sciences and humanities, making it possible for them to grapple with and understand things like power, representation, classification, race, the ways that we co-construct technical systems and a social world. We want them to understand these things, and we want them to be able to put these tools to work in shaping the world they want to see. So faculty from those parts of the universities, the social sciences and the humanities, this is what they do. Here at Berkeley, we found that we can invest in a dual approach, dedicated and integrated. That is, dedicated classes taught by faculty who have expertise in the humanities and social sciences, integrated materials going into technical classes that bring these perspectives directly into the technical work. This is not a simple thing. Some scientists and humanists have some pretty sharp tools for thinking about everything from the meanings of privacy and ownership to systemic racism to the narrative of Silicon Valley. We do it in part, we do this work because human context and ethics aligns very strongly with our university's values, and it's been integral to Berkeley's work from the start. And a fourth piece, a critical piece for us, is coming to grips on this foundation with equity and inclusion and having them more adequately baked in. That's our aspiration, in a way that truly recognizes the life experiences that students bring with them into the classroom. When they walk into a data science classroom and hear about algorithmic reproduction of bias in the criminal justice system, or facial recognition tech and how it's used by police, or the construction of categories that we collect census data in. Having concepts like justice and privilege at our disposal in the classroom, this kind of representation and open discussion of difference makes for better, more societally aware, more socially reflective and adequate data science. So where are we along this trajectory? At Berkeley, I would say, measured in these four areas, something like this. When it comes to engaging application domains, I think we're about 70, 80% of where we want to go. On infusing computation and inference, I'd put it at 80%, in part because that takes a smaller group of collaborators who need to work with each other intensively over the years. With human context and ethics, I'd say we're about 30% as far as we'd want to go. We have a start, we keep moving forward, and yet there's much more to be done. And if that's true for human context and ethics at Berkeley, it's clearly true for coming to grips with equity and inclusion. We have a long way to go there and much to learn from others. Institutional change, I think you see, especially in the last two categories, is a long game. So how do you talk about this? Interdisciplinarity is a word that's often used. Well, that's true. I'd say we're just doing it. Interdisciplinarity can sometimes seem like a soft focus word, making what's pretty hard maybe sound easy. One thing that we've seen being interdisciplinary involves in our experience is actually adequate grounding in the disciplines, to understand the stakes of choices, to know what we don't know, and know how we need to learn more. This is a version of interdisciplinarity that works with the disciplines as they are and as they're changing. And then the other thing interdisciplinarity involves very clearly is sometimes wrestling with quite dramatically incommensurate ways of tackling the world. So that's a nice segue. Let's take the model of change seriously of coalition building. Rather than formal approval processes, say, let's look at breadth and cooperation and buy-in. How do you get cooperation between departments? It starts obviously by showing respect. There's a world of complexity under those words, though. It starts with disciplinary tolerance. It starts with faculty who are excited to do this. That's been deeply true of Berkeley's faculty in statistics and computer science. It's also true more broadly across our campus. And the persuasion is often lateral, faculty talking to faculty, rather than directed from above. It might seem obvious, but in first order, this kind of transformation is about people, not about departments or disciplines. You don't have to get to everyone, but you do need to create forward motion and momentum by working with people where they are on their terms. And then how do you make it real? What does this big tent strategy really look like? It includes things like providing training for the faculty, Victoria Robinson, who I mentioned, or modules developers, students like Ian Castro, who go and consult with faculty, do outreach, develop curriculum with and for them. Means working also with the partner organizations like our Center for Teaching and Learning, our Academic Innovation Studio, our Social Sciences Data Laboratory, our Faculty Senate. The Senate at Berkeley is actually where faculty get to know each other across the disciplines. It's a core part of our cross-departmental faculty networks and has been a consistent champion in our efforts in data science. I'll say also commitment to the application domains, to human context and ethics, and to equity and inclusion has been crucial in getting buy-in across campus here. So carrying it through, if that's the strategy, coalition building, creating the big tent, how do you take the actions that follow from that model? Run through these very briefly, and I'd love to have more conversation about them, but just how do you create the courses across the campus? This has largely at Berkeley been faculty who are inspired and pitch in as part of their regular job. At Berkeley, within our teaching loads, there is some space for that. It would be easier to have course buyouts, of course. And of course, part of creating the courses is the students who have risen to the occasion and teach and develop course materials themselves, without whom the Berkeley program would not be nearly so far. So how do you create the degree programs, major and minor? The broad coalition turns out to be worth it. You might be afraid that design by a committee would lead to a many-headed hydra. That's not been our experience here, because the faculty who we're working with are engaged and interested in innovation. It does mean, however, that we have to commit to finishing the process by designing by committee, commit to reaching a solution, because the students need us to give an answer rather than be fighting disciplinary battles. We end up exploring the design parameter space pretty fully and having the challenging conversations and working out the problems. And our experience is the broad coalition is really worth the effort. How do you create the student environment? That means a lot of making space for student leadership and then empowering them to follow their inspiration, empowering them to recruit very broadly, getting outside of the standard disciplines where people already know how to code, and getting folks from the other areas deeply into the conversations, not just faculty there, but students in an environment that welcomes them. How do you get the infrastructure built? Again, here too, it was pitching in, deliberately leveraging that worldwide community of open source developers. So we hope that what we've been able to develop at Berkeley, this approach of teaching through Jupyter notebooks in a browser on a server, can help others so that you don't have to develop the same things. Rather, the infrastructure that we've been fortunate to be able to build can serve you as well. How do you get financial investment? The story here is actually we didn't get it at the start. We had to beg, steal, and borrow. I hope that because Berkeley was able to do that and now can show the value, other institutions of higher education won't have to. We did break Berkeley's resource allocation model just because our classes grew so fast. So from that, we've learned to be rigorously cognizant of institutional incentives and resource allocation practices now. And finally here, how do you get leadership buy-in? You've seen that this was a very grassroots movement at Berkeley. So it took years of work to get leadership buy-in, and I would say it's ongoing. Our early adopter, our Dean of Undergraduate Education in Berkeley's largest college of letters and science, was willing to support it because he saw the value for the students and the value of institutional change. And from that dean, it moved up the levels of institutional leadership from there. It moved upward, and the students honestly did a big piece of that work of persuasion for us by voting with their seats and showing their confidence. So what made it work? I want to step out to the big picture, pull out some lessons for strategy and for process. So strategically, we might have chosen to take on a reduced challenge here. Just build a technical major, just build a broad major, just build a socially aware major, and all of the courses and programs that support it. We made the strategic gamble, the strategic choice to take on the full challenge. We definitely feel that it's paid off. In part because that lets us take a set of values across those dimensions that very much match our institution's values. We made the strategic choice as well to center it on the students rather than on departments, to work towards what they needed, to build new courses for them, and new degree programs, majors, minors, all sorts of opportunities that start from them rather than from us. So those were strategic choices. Let's talk about some of the process lessons. This was grassroots that had to meet top-down commitment. And the work of folks in the middle, people like deans, has been essential there in getting the resource allocation aligned. So bottom up, top down have to come together and get stitched together at the middle level. That's part of our process lesson, that it's not any one way. We also learned that it takes a both and combination, both faculty who will live and die for this at the core of the program, creating multiple courses in some cases. And that has to reach out together to the rest of the campus and involve faculty who are willing to do what works for them and do it on their own terms. A final process lesson is, it's been 6 years to this point. That is a relatively long process, and that has had its benefits, because without the long process, we couldn't have built the coalition by socializing the program as broadly and expansively as we have. So those lessons on strategic and process set us up well, both for the education program and for the larger reconfiguration of the university that we've been in the middle of. In creating a division of computing, data science, and society, we've essentially mirrored those lessons. So there are structural similarities, deep and important, between the undergraduate curriculum and the new college level division of computing, data science, and society that we have. The same spirit, the same components, many of the same players. This division, like the undergraduate curriculum, is not an end in itself. A new academic structure never should be. The division is a means to an end, the same kind of response to something new in the world that we want to shape change to be adequate to. In my observation, and I'm not alone here, creating computing, data science, and society has been Berkeley's biggest transformation of the last decades. It's been critical to building the core. It's touched just about every part of campus, and it's widely seen as democratic, participatory, and good. So to go back out to institutional transformation. In fact, my sense is that the rise of data science and the way that we've constructed it, with the features of, holistic, connected, embedded in social consciousness, technically strong, that this rise is probably one of the most significant intellectual transformations that the university needs to undergo in our lifetimes. So creating a data science program that's adequate to that world, creating something that actually meets the needs of the day, is part of the process of changing the university. Data science is a means as well to bringing about institutional change, institutional transformation. That is part of what we're doing. And how do you do that? Well, you do it first of all by recognizing that institutional transformation is what you're doing and taking cues from what we know about institutional structural transformation, which means understanding data science as, I'll say it, a social movement. That's not simply a turn of phrase. So I come from the area of human context and ethics. The course I teach, Data 104, is just deeply in that vein of thought. By training and by background, I'm a historian. Historians study the transformation of human affairs over time. We study it and we think about how to shape it, and then we go to work. This is what we're in the middle of now. So I deeply believe that this is a social movement that we're in the midst of, intellectual and institutional at the same time. And I'm welcoming to it, the social movement of shaping data science across education in a way that we all hope, will be fully adequate to the world that we have. So thank you.